One of the most basic, as I've already mentioned, was the discovery that Islamic law is in no way synonymous with the Quran itself. When you start reading through the Quran with a view to looking for hard and fast rules, you quickly realize that it isn't commands at all that typify its language. It's invitations to reflect. And those invitations, it's got to be said, are backed by some pretty harsh otherworldly sanctions, promises of eternal paradise and threats of eternal damnation. But earthly sanctions are actually entirely exceptional. There's only 4 sins which are said to require punishment in the Quran. I'll list them. The first is theft, which is made punishable by amputation of the right hand. The second is adultery, which is made punishable in the Quran, not by stoning, interestingly, but by 100 lashes. The third is false accusations of adultery, so it operates as a safeguard, which is punishable by 80 lashes. So if you commit adultery, you're punished by 100 lashes. If you're falsely accused of it, your accuser is punished by 80 lashes. And violent disorder, that's a shorthand. It's actually it's defined in a slightly different way, but it was always understood to mean violent disorder. And that offence carried 3 possible sentences, the lowest of which was exile, the most harsh of which, has got to be said, was crucifixion. But crucifixion wasn't a penalty that was invented by the Muslims. Crucifixion was something which the Romans and the Persians had been using for hundreds of years before the Muslims themselves. The reality is that if you look in the Quran, there isn't a mandatory death sentence anywhere. The closest that it comes is a verse which is attributed to the Torah, explicitly attributed to the Torah in the Quran. The Quran says, as said in the Torah, in which there is much guidance and light, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, etc. But in that situation, according to the Quran, believers should exercise mercy, because mercy is good in the eyes of God. And let's remember, this is the 7th century, and this is a time when, as I know because of the last book that I was writing, Europeans weren't using witnesses at all. They were resolving criminal cases by asking God to, for example, make a defendant float if he or she was guilty, and sink if they were innocent. Muslims required witnesses in all cases. You've heard that the false accusations of adultery were punishable. In order to prove adultery, you had to have 4 eyewitnesses, and the way that was always understood by Islamic jurists was 4 eyewitnesses to the actual act of penetration. It's not a crime that resulted in punishment very often. The reason I'm setting that out is to set out is because it's crucial to recognise the historical context in which these in which Islamic law originated. Because the Quran, which is conventionally said by Muslims to have been revealed to the Prophet between the years 610 and 630, according to the Christian calendar, represented a moral revolution at the time.